Callie, what was your question?
Why hasn't the federal government done anything because so many people are dying?
Why hasn't the federal government done anything for so many people? I'll rebuttal that by saying the federal government has done stuff since the 50s, since it was really, really bad. Like the regulations on how, like, you can't have, with the ads and things like that, you can't have ads on TV anymore, things like that. And how they've kind of created a negative stigma around cigarettes. Are you talking more cigarettes or more vaping?
Both.
Both? Okay. So cigarettes, I would say they've done a little more than they have done with vaping. And I think it's because money. Like, it's so much money for the economy, and it just helps out. So it's the same thing with marijuana. Like, vape and marijuana are kind of the same, not the same thing, because they affect you in different ways, but money-wise, they're kind of the same thing, and they're newer, and a lot of people are still using them and buying them. And so it creates a lot of revenue for the government, and we also don't know the long-term effects of it. So we can't just take it away from people if we don't know the long-term effects of how it's going to affect you. Is that kind of what you would say? Yeah. What we got pulled up?
I said, why can't we find a healthier thing to replace smoking and vaping?
Because because people still need because the thing that keeps you addicted to nicotine, to smoking and vaping is nicotine, and nicotine in itself isn't healthy. So people are addicted to the nicotine, and what did I say about nicotine? What does it do to your blood vessels? It what them? It shrinks them, exactly. So it shrinks them, just like how cholesterol will narrow the blood vessels as well, causing higher blood pressure, higher heart rate, which can lead to risks of stroke, heart attack, and heart disease. So by doing things like that, I mean, it's just, you'd have to do something to get rid of the nicotine, and the nicotine in itself gets rid of the withdrawals and the withdrawal symptoms. So people stick with it because if I take another hit of nicotine, those withdrawal symptoms are going to go away and I'm going to feel better right now. Instead of taking the bad with what it is and then trying to ride it out and getting through it, and then eventually I'm not going to feel bad, but it gets so bad for some people at some point where they can't function throughout their daily life, so they have to do something about it. What's up?
Just was like, why hasn't the government done anything about it yet?
Kind of what she said, yeah. Money-wise, basically, does anyone else have a reason they can think of they want to share? At all? Nothing?
Anybody know what a lobbyist is?
Yeah, that's a good one. A lobbyist.
Lobbyists are people who are in Washington D.C. who are paid by special interests like big tobacco, big chicken, whoever, whose whole goal is to make sure that no laws are passed that are going to hurt their product. So if I'm employed by big tobacco, and
I pass a law, and I'm trying to pass a law, but he doesn't want it to go through,
I'm going to try to influence him somehow, almost like bribery. You can't bribe people, but like, hey, if you vote no on this, Mr. Warner, I will take you and your family. You can take my private jet to the Bahamas for a week and have a nice vacation.
So kind of a give and take, and then nothing really gets done. All of a sudden, the vote goes down, the bill never gets passed, and that's how we do it.
So if you take a handful of years ago, probably about 5 or 6 now, there was a rash of kids dying from vaping. They were vaping bootleg, like cartridges, like homemade cartridges, where people were just putting all kinds of random stuff in there. People were dying from it all over the country. President Trump, who was the president at the time, who came out and said, we're going to ban all these flavors, we're going to ban this, that, and the third. Obviously, it didn't get done because by the time, regardless of who the president is, regardless of what they say, what actually happens, different story. And by the time you try to pass that legislation, certain senators, House people are going to vote in certain ways.
The president has a lot of power, but again, the way our government works, not everybody has all the power. The House, the Senate, just has some things like that. It has to all go through everybody, but fortunately it doesn't, because some people don't have the same priorities that other people do. Okay. Brooklyn, what you got?
Secondhand vape is bad as secondhand smoke.
Secondhand vape is bad as secondhand smoke. Honestly, I don't really know, because it kind of goes back to is vaping a safer alternative than smoking? Is we don't have the long-term effects of it yet. So and plus people who started vaping, they're around their friends who are probably vaping as well. So can you really distinguish if they're getting it from secondhand vape or if they're getting it from the vape they're actually using. Now the majority of people who are vaping will probably be starting to have kids here in the next 10, 15 years, because it kind of started with my age group, where when I was like 15 and 16, that's when vapes really got into schools, like you could see them everywhere, and people my age are just now starting to start families. And so the generation ahead of me wasn't really into vaping, so millennials aren't really into vaping all that much. Kind of the end of the millennials, start of the Gen Z era is where it really started with, and those people are just now starting to have families. So we'll see the stats from that, what secondhand vape can do to people if they do it all the time, what they can do, and what effects it has on maybe younger children and the people in their house, kind of like that. Eli, what do you have?
Why do you think
Addiction. Addiction. Again, what did I draw up on the board? That chart. And so what did it symbolize? So what was the start of the graph? They did it why? To feel good, exactly. And so as it went down, and so as the graph continued, the high went down, the withdrawals got worse, until eventually what happened at the end of the graph? Why would they smoke or vape? Just to not feel bad, exactly. So eventually it goes to the point where, oh, I'm only doing this for so much, and it doesn't take long to get to the end of that graph. It could take somewhat, it depends on your body type, male, female, things like that, just how, honestly, how your body works. Like like Nick and Nash are like kind of the same size, but it could affect them two completely different ways. Like Nash could vape for 5 years and it not affect him at all. Nick could vape for 6 months and he could end up having double lung transplant like that kid we saw yesterday. It just depends on who the person is and how physically active they are, how healthy they are, things like that. So again, starts out, they want to feel good, it's cool, ends up being, I can't function without it, I need it to not feel bad to get through my daily life. Okay, next one, what do you got?
Is third hand vape like the same as third hand smoking?
Oh, saving it has taken away from it. Third hand vape, same as third hand smoke.
I wouldn't think so.
I wouldn't really
Vapes tend to be more odorless than regular cigarettes.
So kind of with the second hand vape as well, and it's third hand as well. I mean, we don't know enough yet, but I wouldn't think so. It's not really the same kind of smoke. It doesn't have the carbon monoxide in it as well. It doesn't have that tar in it either. So probably not to the same extent, just because it's not burned off the same way. It's not the same chemical, so it probably affects it. It depends on how it lays on other objects. Definitely, they would probably need more studying on it. Saving, you come up with something else real quick, or you want me to come back to you?
You can come back to me.
I'll go back to it. Okay, Nash, what do you got?
Who created the first vape?
Want to Google that? Who created the first vape?
Guy in China who created it in the 60s.
Yeah.
His dad was a huge smoker and he was trying to find a healthier alternative. So he's generally the guy that created some, I don't know his name, some guy in China.
And China created the first vape. Do you remember what the vape, how I described how it works? You guys remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heats up, the coil heats up, and
Yep.
the oil's the liquid.
Yep, oil's the
and then
liquid.
The
and-
vapor is what you're breathing.
Yep, exactly. Okay, cool. Nick, what you got?
I got why did they choose brown and white for cigarettes?
Brown and white.
Yeah, like why that color?
Why that color?
Might be the most random question.
Yeah.
It's a good question,
I guess
but
it's
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I guess it's just the color of the paper. That's the color of it's just the color of tobacco. It's just what tobacco, how a refined finished tobacco looks. So it looks like, why is marijuana green? Things like it's just how the plant looks. It's just how it turns out, how it's ground up, all the chemicals that they add into it and things like that. All the, the carcinogens that we saw, the chemicals of 40,000, whatever chemicals that are together. You put it all together, it makes up this brown mess.
And the brown tip used the time is the filter, so if you ever tear a cigarette apart, I think that's gonna be much more dense on the inside, so the idea is it filters and catches some of the tar and all that stuff, obviously doesn't catch all of
Like,
it.
you know how you usually see the butt of cigarette on the ground, you don't smoke that part, there's nothing in that part, it's the white part that has your stuff, that has your tobacco in it. Once that's all smoked away, they put it out and it's not on the ground. Leave it with it.